growth and change in the frontier economies of the world.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Frontier Matters. It's me and Tobi alone again today. The previous episode was supposed to do the second part of our discussion on AI. So we discussed the promise of AI in the first episode, and now we want to try and look at the perils of AI. What will happen given the disadvantages that places like Nigeria have, and the fact that this whole rollout and development is happening whether or not Nigeria can participate, whether or not African countries can participate. The future marches on regardless. So yeah, wanted to discuss some of this and see maybe, what are the challenges, what are the dangers of being left behind in an arms race like this, if you like. So yeah, Tobi, welcome. How are you doing?
Yeah, V. Nice to talk to you again. I'm all right.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I think the first thing to talk about is data centers. Obviously, these are kind of like the obvious ones. So, everyone has seen the stories around in the papers, the crazy amount of money that is being spent on data centers. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta, Facebook's parent.
Did you see that video of the White House?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that, So I mean, between Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Facebook alone, they were planning to increase their capex on data centers, or well, mostly data centers, $300 billion in 2025. And I think McKinsey said that there will be $5.2 trillion of investment in data centers by 2030. So this is like just 5 years down the line. These things are massive. When you see how they are, you see that, they occupy so much space and all of that. But I think the thing I wanted to really talk about with data centers is that obviously the investment cost required is significant. But the more I read about data centers, the more I basically, the way I view it in my mind is that it is no different from building a power plant. Because these things consume so much energy, so much electricity, now you have data centers where a big data center can be 1 gigawatt, 1,000 megawatts requirement. So, if you have struggled, like a country like Nigeria, if you have struggled with building power plants and all of that, it is very, very difficult to understand or to see how you can participate in the data center infrastructure rollout. And obviously this is one of the biggest struggles that Nigeria has had, building power plants, whether it's dams, whether it's hydro, whether it's coal, whether it's gas, or even forget about nuclear, because that's not even solar or anything. So I think this is the biggest, or probably one of the biggest challenges, in the sense that if you can't build power plants, you probably can't build data centers. And if you can't build data centers, then automatically you are a tenant in the AI race, because obviously your data is going to be held elsewhere. It's going to be processed elsewhere. And these things are huge. They require huge amounts of computing power and data processing to make it happen. So for this one, I mean, I don't know. I think the amount of, I don't know, Africa as a whole is probably getting like maybe 1% of all the data center spending, right? Global data spending. And whereas places like Malaysia have been able to find a way to get so much data spending. Billions of dollars have been spent in Malaysia and even in other countries in Asia. So I don't know. This one is probably, it's a bit depressing when you think about it, because I'm not sure what the solution is here. We don't really have that many advantages in terms of energy and in terms of also cooling and in terms of security and all those kind of things. So I don't know. What do you think about this, Tobi?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, like, I saw in the news in the papers a couple of weeks ago, MTN and Airtel are saying they want to build data center. Is that like legit?
Well, I mean, the data centers, obviously, I mean, before AI, people have been building data centers. So there
Oh
were
yeah,
data
definitely.
centers,
Yeah,
so I mean,
definitely.
you can always build them. But fundamentally, I guess the requirement is kind of like the same. They use energy and they require cooling. Previously, I think the question is just the sheer amount of processing that is
Mm,
required. So, whereas a data center in the past might need 20 megawatts of power just to keep it going, now an AI data center will probably need maybe like 50 times the
mm.
amount of
Oh yeah,
power
yeah.
in there.
True.
Yeah, so we've always had data center. But I mean, if we had, say, something, for example, like, say, you had mountains in Plateau State where there was no insecurity or stuff that, where you can take advantage of natural cooling, then
Yeah,
you could say probably
yeah.
Nigeria has some advantages. Because, I mean, putting a data center in Lagos will mean that you have a lot of challenges in the sense that it's so hot. And to make sure that this thing, first of all, you're going to need a lot of water. And then just for the temperature never to rise above a certain,
Unless you put them underwater. Uh,
exactly, on that, and
yeah.
obviously that brings significant new challenges as well
Mm.
to put them in it. So yes, I think it's I mean, in America they put some in Arizona. Arizona is extremely hot.
Very hot.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
but the key thing is that they are able to build so much energy. They're able to throw so much energy at it, such that they can actually cool it.
Mm.
They can keep them cool. In fact, when I was in Dallas last year, I drove past the data center and I just thought to myself that, I mean, how is it that people are able to build a massive data center here? Because at that time, it was almost 40 degrees in Dallas that summer. But, the energy is cheap enough. They've been able to build cheap enough energy either through solar or even wind or just natural gas. So I guess the fundamental issue here is that if you want to build data center, then you need to be able to deploy energy at scale.
I think like you were saying in the case of China, I think eventually what will matter is what kind of AI market eventually emerges in Nigeria and Africa. So, I mean, what would be the fastest growing or the most popular use case? Is it going to be application? Is it going to be
Mm.
enterprise? Or are we going to have ecosystems where we are building native models? So that will then determine the demand for compute and hence data centers. But I mean, that eventually may become part of the something I'm hoping we will explore in the next couple of
Mm.
weeks, part of our leapfrogging story. So
Yeah, yeah.
you know what happened with telecoms, right? We didn't have power, right? It just added to the capex of the telecoms companies. Like
Yeah.
you then have to put in your own generators and that spend a lot on diesel every day
Mm.
to power your telecom masts. So, but I mean, they build those stations anyways and they power them. But the saddest part is just that there's not going to be any spillover because, I mean, like you said, fundamentally, we never really learn to build these things. That would have just been the ideal place to start. So, but I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. I
so
think a lot of people also don't realize that because of that cost, because of that additional cost of rolling out base stations, because you have to put the power, the generators, and all that,
yeah,
it
true.
actually reduced the amount of rollouts that Nigeria. So I noticed this, like whenever I'm in Nigeria, coverage is so poor. My phone coverage, I mean, phone just, you can just walk into a spot and it's just completely, I mean, I thought London was bad because London obviously is a very dense city, and then we have a different challenge here of NIMBYism, whereby people don't want you to build a base station anywhere near them. But I thought London was bad, but I mean Lagos is actually a lot worse because whenever I'm in Lagos, my phone battery runs down very much quicker, and just connecting to the network is a lot much, especially when you want to use internet. Because of that additional cost, people had to base stations weren't rolled out across the country like they could have been, right? So I don't know what is outside Lagos, but I still imagine that there are loads of, dark spots where coverage is almost kind of like non-existent in
Yeah,
there.
definitely.
Yeah. And then, if you're in a city like Lagos, coverage should at least be blanketing the state. But when you have to have a generator to a base station every time and then provide your own security and all of that, unfortunately, that just limits the amount of base stations that you can roll out, really, because it might be
And
costing you two. Yeah.
yeah, and the truth is, I mean, like you said, it's poor, but again, when you look at the scale of the investments and what these guys have done, guys like MTN and co, it's incredible. But it annoys me when analysts and other types look at that and the story you want to tell is that is some kind of innovative business model and how to make it in Africa, in Nigeria. Like, why do we pretend like this is normal? Like, it's not normal. And we should always like push ourselves to build things, to do hard stuff, not
Yeah.
force private companies to go this extra mile. And then, I mean, the story you want to tell yourself is, oh, yeah, Western multinationals are a poor fit because they don't want to build their own power stations. Or, I mean, another example of what you were talking about is cable. Cable television, for example, we get our cable here by satellite TV, basically, which is extremely poor because we never really learned and still cannot lay broadband cables
Yep.
effectively.
Yep.
I mean, these are just fundamental problems that feed into everything, and it's nothing to encourage, it's nothing to celebrate, it's not a story of resilience. Honestly, it's just a
Yeah.
story of poor governance, and lack of state capacity.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, like you said, I mean, if you think you've escaped the problem or you don't need to learn how to do something, just looking at the future, all those skills are going to be required. You need to do last mile. You need to know how to lay cables underground. You need to know how to protect them. You need to know how to put fiber where you need to do that and just basically deliver this kind of infrastructure. It's not going to get easier, right? You cannot outsource everything all the time.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
so let's look at roads, for example, something as basic as roads. So I know that the typical thing, so we don't really build that much roads. We are really poor at that. But even if you look at the quality of roads we build, Lagos, for example, of course, it's been raining in Lagos since yesterday. Typically,
Right.
it's always flooding. And even coming home this evening, I was telling folks that, yeah, every time it rains in Lagos, you see government officials or come out and say it is improper waste disposal, blah, 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 blah. But I asked them, is that why bridges are flooding too in Lagos?
Videos yesterday of Maryland, and I thought, wow, like I didn't even know that
Yeah,
was possible.
got it because those things, it's terrible engineering. Like you build you need to see the quality of roads in Lagos now and the bridges. It's like they were built by carpenters or I don't know, well, tailors, whatever. Like there's no proper way to drain water in any of these infrastructures that it's like nobody even thought about that as something that happens on roads, right? I know of a very famous signature infrastructure project here in Ikeja, somewhere behind me here, where they started retrofitting the drainages after the bridge had been built and commissioned. Like that was when it occurred to them, like, oh, yeah, we need a way to dress. So they now started digging holes again on the bridges and running pipes. So it's just how bad we've gotten at doing anything right is highly underrated in this journey that the country is on right now. And I don't really see much attention.
I think that there's also a challenge in the sense that it does not look like something you've mastered or that you are learning something. So, for example, every time I see a road in Lagos or something, it's almost kind of like the way the road is designed or stuff. There's no pattern to it. So, like, it doesn't look like something you've learned that is now repeatable, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, road is infrastructure, right? You would imagine that once you've learned how to build a road, you can then repeat it multiple times, right? So you've learned the skill and then you can just have efficiency gains and all that. But every time I see a road in Lagos, like when I see the pictures, like, okay, this doesn't look anything like the last road you built or something. You know, the road markings, for example, there's no consistent theme to them. If you drive around Europe, for example, you know, the road markings are the same. And it is even down to the fact that the blue paint, right, that you have to use to do road marking is specified and codified by the EU, right? So that paint, that particular blue paint that you see across Europe, it is a particular type of paint that has been, you know, tested as, okay, this is the best paint to reflect vehicle lighting at night so that anybody can see it, and obviously sunlight during the day and all of that kind of thing, and also the fact that it can last for long. You know, the font that is used to write, you know, road markings and all of those things are specified and consistent. So if you are driving around, and even in China, when I visited China, you can see this across the country. The way the roads are marked is the same. The paint, the font, the style, all of those kinds of boy. You know, in Nigeria now, everyone just does whatever they like. You know, maybe this governor builds a road. You know, they use some kind of font to, you know, road markings, and then another company, and then you move a few meters or a few kilometers away and you just see completely different stuff. So again, you know, this kind of thing, when you want to roll out that kind of thing, you're not doing it as if you are mastering and learning it to be able to roll it out. And again, you know, to the point of the AI discussion is that these things will need to be repeatable. I mean, if you look at a data center, there's nothing spectacular or eye-catching about it. Most of them just look like boxes, right? So, and when you enter, if you go inside the data center, it is just rows upon rows upon rows of GPUs, water piping, all that kind of stuff. You know, everything that basically gets it. You know, and these things are the way the GPUs are stacked. These are all, you know, well carefully thought out research and say, okay, this is the best way for us to maximize the arrangement of the GPUs, that sort of thing. The whole thing just looks like a clean box, but the idea is that, you know, once you've built one, then you've learned how to, you know how to do it, and you can quickly repeat it, which is why you're seeing a lot of these data centers are popping up really, really quickly. Once you have funding in place, everything is there. You can just repeat that design. So Elon Musk, for example, has built some data centers at astonishing pace, right? So because they figured it all down, and if he needs to build it, so and when you think about it, right? If any of these guys want to build a data center in Nigeria today, they don't really need anything from Nigeria beyond certain guarantees. They know how to deliver it. They can put up a data center. If they need to do it in 6 months, they can do it. So, which means that the missing bit is the enablement, the facilitation, all the other kind of stuff, just to make sure that, you know, people's investments are safe. If you guarantee all of that, then I'm pretty sure that Facebook can put up a data center in Nigeria in 6 months, and that includes even the power plant. They can do it, right? But, you know, to get to that point where they are comfortable enough to say, okay, herdsmen are not going to destroy it, or bandits are not going to do it, or area boys are not just going to come and destroy it, and the water supply will be guaranteed, because obviously they cannot manufacture water on their own, or the cabling and everything I need, or even if it's gas. If I'm building a gas plant, for example, that the gas supply will get to me, you know, in guaranteed, and I don't want to have to turn off the data center for 6 hours because there's one issue, that sort of thing. So all of these things that require repeatability, mastering, and all these things, you know, we've not really learned how to do it, but we cannot escape it. You know, they're going to be there in the future, whether we like it or not.
So, but if I ask you to speculate that, what would be in terms of adoption, because it's adoption and the emergence of a relatively thick market that will bring these investments. I mean, in whatever form they eventually take. What would you speculate would be the killer app when you look at Nigeria or Africa? You and I were at the Sam Altman thing back when it came to Lagos, and I think In our review of that event, we talked about education, we talked about health, like telemedicine and stuff. So what would you speculate would be a killer app?
So let's rewind to 2015. If we go back to 2015 now, we think about that year, Xi Jinping and the Chinese government, they came up with what they called Internet Plus strategy. So the whole idea, and I think we talked about this on the previous podcast, is that was the year they decided that they wanted to bring offline activities, things that were happening offline, they wanted to bring it into the online world. They wanted to put them on the internet, right? To use internet technology to break down any barriers between online and offline, to sort of merge those two worlds together. So they had that actual clear strategy called Internet Plus. Now, the way that played out is that you started having things like internet and restaurants, which is all this food delivery, right? So you could then order food on your phone, and you can see that this is a massive industry in Nigeria. So essentially, that was bringing together the world of food and restaurants and then putting them online. Then you had shopping, something that is not really common in a lot of other countries, but it's super huge in China, is live streaming, whereby some celebrities or whatever can be doing live streaming for hours, and people will be buying products as they're doing it. So live streaming, kind of like e-commerce type thing. They're not too common out in the West, but in China they are massive. And obviously then you had, internet and taxis, internet and all those kind of things. So basically, so that was what they did. And the whole idea again was that, the Chinese approach is that you have this technology, put it in everything, and let's see where the best use cases will come out of. So that was in 2015, and obviously we've seen how that has played out. Now we're in 2025, and last week in August, basically, I think August 27 or something, the State Council of China, they came out with a paper called Internet Plus. And basically, what that paper again said this time around was that now they want to put AI, I said Internet Plus, sorry, I beg your pardon, AI Plus was the name of the paper, right? And what they've now said is that now, just in the same way they did the whole Internet Plus thing, now they are going to put AI in everything, right? So they want to, for example, by 2027, this is just 2 years down the line, they want to put AI, they want to achieve what they call broad and deep AI integration in 6 key areas, right? So those areas will be anything from hardware, smartphone, mobile payments, toys, any kind of daily necessity. Essentially, what they want is that 70% of what people in China interact with, they want at least 70% of what the daily interaction of the average Chinese person to have some level of AI involved in it, right? So I mean that's payments, everything in there. They want to put AI in everything. So the reason why I bring this up is that because of the approach of China, and this is quite different from the US approach, right? The US, they are kind of like focused on, getting out the best models out there, building out the data center, and leaving the people and the market to figure out what the best use cases are, right? So, for example, in the US now, the best use case so far has been coding, right? And then people are doing all kinds of fun, fooling around type things. But the Chinese have a more practical approach, finding the best applications of this thing. And, the AI Plus people talks about what they say are their strengths. They want it to be essential infrastructure, essentially. They want it to be like and the way the paper describes that they want AI to be like electricity or the internet, right? So you use it in everything, horoscopes, traffic, congestion. We talked about some in the previous episode where we were talking about how AI glasses in farming and infrastructure monitoring. In fact, one of the ones I found really interesting was when they said they want AI to in plus in social well-being, right? So basically they're saying things like they want intelligent assistants, intelligent AI agents to in actual companionship and companionship. They also want to they want to create more cultural content, and they want to use Chinese cultural elements and symbols, that sort of things, to pull out. So it's very, very encompassing. There's also a bit that says they want to use AI for governance capacity. They want to use it for industrial development. Actually, if I start from the top, the 6 key areas is the first area is science and technology, where they want to use AI to accelerate scientific discovery, right? So basically, like maybe discover new drugs or treatments, those sort of things. Then they wanted to use it for industrial development. Obviously, they've always had this challenge about consumption and the fact that they're a bit export reliant. So they want to create metaverse, drones for delivery and drones for everything at that low altitude level. Then obviously social well-being, which I just mentioned. They want human beings and machines to relate more closely together. And then governance capacity, again, which I also mentioned, in terms of local governments to incorporate AI into everything they do, states and provincial governments. And then the final bit is what they call global cooperation, right? So they want to use it as an international tool of international relations. In a very short period of time, they are going to figure out all the best AI application use cases. And then the next stage, and this is what they've done in other stuff as well, is to start exporting this stuff. So once they've gotten that, then they will begin to export it. Now, the export of this is going to be slightly different from them exporting train technology or even power plants or all this kind of thing, because, I mean, exporting data centers to Nigeria probably will not happen, but they can export applications to Nigeria. So, which then gives us this whole challenge of what I was talking about, in the sense that if you can't build power plants and data centers in Nigeria, then you are going to almost certainly have to deal with a situation whereby your data will be processed elsewhere. To be honest, I mean, this is probably already happening, but in the sense that just the sheer amount of computing power that is required will mean that you will need to, if a lot of Nigerians start adopting these tools, then you are going to rely on external data centers and external power. And the way the Chinese have done this is that as part of that effort, they've done what they call the East-West, right? So basically, they're saying, because of the nature of how China's infrastructure is, the western part of China there's so much cheap power there. So you have these massive solar farms and all that. But there's hardly anybody lives there. But power is so cheap. They have huge solar farms, huge wind farms, and every other thing in there. But all of that is happening in the west. And then in the east, that's where the computing power is. So they have an approach called East Data, West Computing. That's their kind of like initiative where, all the power to supply the data centers are generated in the west, and the computing is done in the east. Now, because they have so much of that already, you have to now look at a situation whereby if they come up with an application that really blows up and so many people find it useful, maybe for education and all of that, then you have to realize that your data is probably going to be processed in the eastern part of China and powered by power from the western part of China. So I don't know if all of that makes some sense, but I think, that's just the way I've been thinking about it, in the sense that, number one, because of China's approach and because of their scale and because of the data and because of the strength that they have, that the most useful AI applications for a country like Nigeria are almost certainly going to come out of China. And the way this is going to be exported is that it's going to be exported full stack, right? So in the sense that what you are going to get is just the application. You probably won't get the supporting infrastructure, so the compute and the power.
Yeah, that's interesting, to say the least. It would be interesting to see that, for me, primarily because Chinese digital products have not really had much success in Nigeria, and I think Africa. I mean, WeChat, for example, made some noise in the early days, but really didn't take, because those products are built primarily for Chinese markets. So, but it will be interesting to see. One thing I want us to talk about, and I know that we didn't get the safety conversation in the last AI podcast we did, which is where China scares me, which is where be like China is not something I'm going to happily sign up for. on anything, as a matter of fact, not just AI, but okay. But before I get to the safety conversation, I want us to quickly talk about jobs. So there was a paper, I think there were two papers recently by, one was by Eric Biosing talking about AI and jobs, because I mean, and other types have been speculating for years about the impact that AI will have on jobs. And some data have started coming in that they are seeing unemployment effects, especially for young people in the US. So I want us to talk about what's the implication, especially in the light of business process outsourcing, and these things like that, countries like Nigeria have started looking to as, a low skilled, low level way where you can, create a lot of jobs. I know that the government has the 3MMT thing, and we have a minister of AI and all of that. But I mean, lo and behold, the AI fire is catching on so rapidly that the employment benefits of even low level services might disappear in just a couple of years. So, and that's really a serious thing to worry about. What are your thoughts in that area?
Yeah. I mean, it's really worrying. It's really worrying because, I mean, this has been a ladder, right? So the first rung of the ladder where poor countries can actually latch onto and climb up, all of a sudden that rung might completely disappear, right? So, I mean, you are looking at things like all kinds of AI opportunities in the sense that if you think that a bot, so if you've engaged with a bot today, they can be quite frustrating. So for example, I have a bank account where I have to phone them every now and again to do something, and the answer to the phone call is always answered by the AI agent. And it's pretty fine within a set range of questions. Once you deviate from that range, maybe you ask something quite different, and then you can just get stuck in a loop where the thing just keeps going, you just keep going round and round with it. So I mean, now I've figured out quickly how to escape the AI and get a human being, an actual human being in there. But I mean, if you're talking to you might actually not know it's an AI until after a couple of minutes, right? So, but the key thing, I think the point I wanted to bring out was that it's a bit frustrating today, like I said, because once you get outside of a certain range of discussion, then the thing gets stuck. But if you imagine that this is the worst it's going to be, right? That it will not get worse than it currently is, then you have to make allowance in your mind for the possibility that this thing can actually replace a human being up to 70-80% level in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
So, and that is really worrying in the sense that it's going to take a lot of, because a Nigerian who is doing a call center job, for example, for a foreign company, what they are doing is it's not so much solving the problem, but they are able to find information. And then, so you tell them where the problem is, and they are able to use the preset information they've been given to hopefully help you solve that problem. And if they can direct you, but you can imagine a world where the AI can do as well as what a Nigerian can do, up to at least 70-80% level, and then you just wonder that. And the AI will be there 24/7. It doesn't ask for a salary. It doesn't complain. It doesn't, so it's a really worrying thing that, it can disappear a lot of low level jobs. And that's just one part of it. The other part where a lot of Nigerians have been able to compete globally and gain opportunities is coding. Right? So a lot of Nigerians who have learned how to code. Yeah.
I was just about to say that the study I was referring to, I'll put up a link to it in the show notes. Actually, largest disemployment effect was in the coding junior level coding, which were young people were disproportionately affected. But like I was having that conversation with someone that it's not really an age thing. Even in my own organization, I've more or less caught most of my junior developers, to be honest, because a lot of these coding agents can do some pretty basic but important things like debug your code, maintain your code base, and all the basic things. Writing code is still, we'll say it's still a bit far off, and there's debate about how much time it actually saves you, because I think automation really is about saving energy, not time. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
But okay, you know, it's such, like you were saying, an industry that appears to be emergent, right? So I was still at an event on last week Thursday where I think you and I talked about this, where somebody was advocating that, let's just scale up tertiary education 100x, 1 million x. Let's train coders, companies around the world, primarily because of demographic issues and that are going to take them, that we don't really have to worry about the domestic labor market. And I was shaking my head in the audience like, these coding jobs may not be available anymore in the next 5 years. So, and then you have a lot of problem in your hand. You have a very angry, young, and jobless.
Exactly.
So my partner and I was joking that, well, maybe it's the insurrection that Africa actually needs may actually come from that. I'm not advocating that, but the disemployment effect are quite worrisome. And also, another point I want to make is, I don't know if you read this paper. Again, I'll put up the links by Danny Roderick and Co. They did, I think it's 17 or 18 country study in Africa talking about labor intensive versus capital intensive. And this was a study on manufacturing, right? And
Yeah.
what they found is that African manufacturers, or even FDI investments in African manufacturing, are increasingly preferring capital intensive investments. So basically what that means is you almost always prefer to automate where you can, primarily because of labor costs and all other constraints. And I see the same pattern in digital tech, even in AI, that people are going to prefer to make the kind of investment that completely eliminates jobs, because you really don't want to deal with the headache. Either it's the skill level or the cost or the regulation or whatever. And it's not something that, again, I see so much attention, especially for a continent that is very jobless and very young,
Yeah.
right? So it's not really part of the conversation at all. And ultimately, what it boils down to, the AI, it's another form of automation. So, and I think what will make the difference at the end of the day will be, but there will be two categories of jobs in the future, in my opinion. Jobs that can be automated and those that can't. We are not, it seems like those industries, those skills, those kinds of jobs that cannot easily be automated. So, soft services, healthcare, things like that. They are the category of skills that we are massively bleeding talent. Massively. So it's something that worries me quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's really worrying. It's really worrying that, if people can, I mean, to be honest, if somebody comes and puts an outsourcing center in Nigeria, they are doing it because it makes business sense to them. It's not a charity operation. And if it stops making business sense, then they'll stop doing it. We just have to, live with that reality. And, if opportunities begin to get cut off, yeah, I mean, there's this, I think Zikoko does it, but there's another account that I always see on Twitter that does anonymous interviews with people who are living in Lagos but earning in dollars,
Yeah.
and working for, and it's always so fascinating when you read those stories and the sheer amount that some of these people make. I mean, even $1,000 a month is a lot of money in Nigeria,
Yeah.
and a lot of these guys earn a lot more than that. If that gets cut off, then you have to start really worrying about, you know, where are the next opportunities going to come from? And like I said, AI might be the opportunity of the future, but it is very possible that we don't get the infrastructure side of it, right? And
Yeah.
where we only get the application side of things just because of the constraints that are in place in terms of, building a data center is the same thing as building a power plant. And if somebody is going to commit to that in Nigeria, then they will need so many guarantees and enabling factors to be able to do it. So potentially you might, if you only get the application side, then you are just you're a consumer, you're just a user that, and you might not really get the jobs and all the other stuff that comes with it. So definitely there's definitely a lot of worrying there. Fundamentally, how can we be a place that is open to capital and easy for capital spending, right? How can Nigeria be a place that is easy for somebody to say, okay, I've spoken to the leadership of this country, I've spoken to all the people in charge, the regulators, I've spoken to all of them, I get a good vibe out of it, and I think I can commit $1 billion to capex in this country. And the thing is, once you spend that money, I mean, you are locked in, right? If you commit to build a data center in there, you are locked in. You cannot just carry the data center. If things go bad, you cannot just carry the data center and leave,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. I
so
mean,
you need
one
exactly
of the main advantages of FDI over FPI, like you
exactly
can
you
move your
need
money, but you can't move the factory.
exactly, and
Yeah.
so you need so many guarantees. You need to be able to say if APC lose the election in 2027, the next set of people are not just going to come in and completely overturn the policy, and all of a sudden my investment is in jeopardy, right? So fundamentally, we just have to be a place where people can actually spend. Because to be honest, in Nigeria today, when was the last time somebody spent $1 billion in a country?
Mm.
I mean, a few weeks ago, I sat down with a friend and we were talking about manufacturing investment in Nigeria, and all we could find was maybe like a couple $100 million, maybe 100 million or $200 million. And even that, I think, I forgot how much Procter and Gamble spent on the fact, and even that has shut down now. After a few years, they've written off that investment. So even to get 100 million to spend outside of oil and gas, obviously, which cost a lot of money, outside of oil and gas, or the kind of things that will actually impact more and more Nigerians. When was the last? I mean, who has spent $1 billion in Nigeria?
Let me blow your mind a bit. Maybe not necessarily, but I was reading UNCTAD's World Investment Report. Again, maybe I'll put up that chart. It's very interesting. Almost all the FDI investments in the last 12 months in Africa was driven by North Africa.
Amazing.
Like, yeah, North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt. Yeah, basically. Like the rest of Africa is just crawling. And like you said, it's very, very worrying. And there's something I'm like willing to stick my neck out of for. I know you and I talk about development a lot, like a lot, that it's something that we write about regularly on the blog. I think that something is happening that is a bit underrated. I know that we talk about democracy, autocracy, or what governance system is better suited for development a lot. I think if you're a democracy, the state-led China type, or broadly maybe the East Asian type of development, where it's high tolerance for corruption, the rules landscape can be shifty, you have a plan, is not so suited for democracies. That's my own theory. I think democracies, to really, really attract investment and make that jump, you need a relatively strong rule of law,
Yep.
property rights system. And I think that is where Nigeria has really struggled. Like you said, you might spend $1 billion today, and even Aliko struggled with that. Most of his fights in the last 2 years has been that, oh yeah, I've spent $20 billion. Yeah, I'm not gonna let it go down the drain. I know there are other explanations for his struggles, but get the gist. Like, it does not feel like your investment is secure, and it's so dependent on who is power. And I think that in terms of having a stable investment environment and a democracy, that is pretty bad. You need, at the very minimum, a rule of law state where
Yeah.
minimal respect. Is like Adam Smith said, like, basically there has to be tolerable administration of justice. So, which is something we don't have, which is something that in the current geopolitical environment is not so sexy anymore. I mean, America has gone to the dogs, so nobody really cares about governance anymore now, right? Nobody cares about corruption anymore. Everything is out of the window, and one can laugh and mock and say, yeah, look at America, they preach to us, but look at what they are doing. But we are going to be the biggest losers in that world,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because, I mean, if America can go that route, okay, then let's see who is going to come and invest in your country, if especially with a very small market and a very poor returns environment, right? Where you don't even have, like we've talked about today and multiple times, basic infrastructure for all these things. And increasingly, this equilibrium is what is pushing governments, even private people, more and more into the arms of China. So this takes me to the China thing, where I'm not really, really sold on China. I will never say be like China is. I would never want to use Chinese products. I'm serious, yeah. And I say that with I understand what China has done for the world. I understand the importance of Chinese capability in manufacturing and trade, and the amount of material abundance that China climbing the development ladder has done for the world. It's been an overwhelmingly good thing. But these rules thing, so for example, last year, like a year ago, I was having a conversation with a bunch of friends. I don't know if you know or noticed this. In the last 10, 12 years, a lot of Western companies, at least in Nigeria, have exited the telecoms equipment value chain completely. So Ericsson, Nokia, almost all the telecoms company now are serviced by Huawei, ZTE, and
Yep.
basically Chinese firms. And my friend was telling me, who work in that space, that these guys regularly censor what we consume at government's request. And not just censorship, surveillance, and a bunch of highly disturbing things. I would not want my data to be processed in China or to even be in the hands of a Chinese infrastructure company, whatever that is. Because, and this is not a question of human rights thing, I know that these are companies who have the ethics is such that they do not care one bit.
They'll just obey. They'll happily work with the government,
Yeah.
and it's partly a function of also how they operate in China,
Yeah.
since obviously the party is
Yeah.
supreme, so
Yeah.
the government can ask you to bring something and you wouldn't do it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly my point. So, like, my friend was saying that even down to the end ban governance protest that was, I think, last year, August or something, that, I mean, they regularly get instructions from the firm's hierarchy to toggle social media data to shadow ban certain things. Ensure that certain types of medias or videos do not even load or get viewership at all. And this is completely going on without public knowledge. Right? So that worries me quite a bit, that especially with technology as important as artificial intelligence, we might become so dependent and reliant on Chinese infrastructure and possibly products. So is one of the things that really concerns me, and and it could.
Yeah. I mean, it is guaranteed. So if the government wants a way to do surveillance, you can always couch anything under the banner of security, right? So you need they can say, oh, we are trying to maintain law and order,
Yep.
that sort of thing. And
Yep.
they have all these products that they've developed in China that can helps the government monitor things, predict where trouble might start from, that sort of thing, facial recognition, and all that kind of, basically a pretty erosion of privacy, pretty deep erosion of privacy, and all those kind of stuff. So, and a lot of these things have been tested in China already. I read a book earlier this year, House of Huawei. I didn't even actually realize, but Huawei has been in Nigeria for a while, like in the 90s. There's a mention of it in the 90s, and they've developed so many surveillance products for China that they are now ready to export, right? So, they'll call them riot management, monitoring phones, all this kind of stuff. And then with AI, this just supercharges all of them. So, like, for example, in Guangzhou, in China, which is where like Alibaba and all those other companies are, and it's kind of like an AI cluster. And imagine AI cluster in China now. They have something that they call the city brain, and it uses Alibaba Cloud, whereby can analyze big data and data generated by video and image recognition. So AI can process all of that. And so basically, you just need to put cameras in different parts of the city, and it's feeding it into the Alibaba cloud, and it is analyzing all of that. Now it's been tested in Guangzhou. It's almost kind of like ready to go. So now it's been exported, right? So I think Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia has been the first one. So you have something like maybe close to 400 camera feeds and things from like traffic light junctions and all of that, and then all of these things can be done in real time. Now, obviously, with a human being, it would have been almost impossible. You would have needed an army of human beings to be monitoring that kind of data, and they'll even miss stuff. But now with AI, it can be watching live video and doing all of this. So all of these things are, and you can be sure that, especially in a country like Nigeria, where, to put it mildly, development is probably not at the top of the mind of most officials. It is not. They are not going to look at the technology and say, and like that, and say, "Oh, this is something that will help us develop Nigeria." The first appeal for them is, how can this help me maintain my hold on power?
Exactly. You read my mind. So, like, off the bat, these are not bad technology. I keep thinking about our struggles with insecurity, and even down to the trouble in the Sahel and the problem of insurgency that is sweeping through parts of the continent. So technology really helps, but in an environment where there are no rules, there are no
Exactly. There are
restraints,
no
there are
guardrails, no human rights.
nothing. So it just becomes, free for all. As you are aware, I went through a little bit of a robbery situation last year,
Yeah.
and during the police investigation, the funny story, the lead police detective on my case was telling me that most of the requests that comes to is that, so this guy specializes in surveillance, tracking, tailing and stuff like that. Most of the requests he gets, at least by his own estimation, 60 to 70% are from politicians, so like governors, who are looking to find girlfriends who either stole their money or their dollars after a wild night. So that is what we use, how we use technology and power.
So you can imagine that you give these people AI, and they're just, they are going to think of a bad, what you might call a bad use first before they think of anything else.
Exactly. Imagine giving some weekend surveillance powers in Abuja.
Yeah, I mean, that would just be, I can't even begin to imagine. Imagine Wiki AI in the hands of Wiki.
So I mean, it's crazy, but I mean, it will be very fun next couple of years. I really wish we stop being spectators a little bit, and I don't see much happening from the government. That's why the whole AI hype and the minister. I hate that, by the way, but I don't want to rant, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Nigeria is going to be an AI taker. There's no serious AI development that's going to happen in Nigeria in terms of the actual technology, the underlying technology, or even the supporting infrastructure. So I think the focus, and this is just the reality of it, the focus is going to be on the application, where can it be used? Even those applications, where are they going to be developed? And like I said, my best guess is China, right? So just in the same way that China puts smartphones in the hands of so many more Nigerians that would probably have had them, or even electric vehicles. Now you're seeing things happening with those in Nigeria with us. So the best guess is that whatever useful AI application happens will probably come from China. Maybe from the West, you might get education applications just because of the language issues and the general better development, or the more suitable material that can come out of the West. So maybe we might get all of that. But in terms of the things that might either help or actually maybe even just fry people's brains, like mindless entertainment that will keep people at least maybe keep them occupied. So maybe they are not committing crime, but then they're just on their phones. I don't know if you follow Dr. Alice Evans. Yeah, her name's yeah, one of the things she speculated on recently was the fact that dropping fertility is linked to phones, in the sense that people can now disappear into their phone. The phone is now an alternative to actually getting up and going to look for a woman, right? So just, or even it can in some ways replace sex, right? So you have access to all kinds of things on your phone. And what she's seen, and she did some pretty interesting analysis around is that what she's saying is that the one thing that seems to be explaining, it's not contraceptives, it's not even female education that in the way that we might think about is actually maybe technology adoption, whereby all of a sudden people have an alternative and then they are maybe having less sex and then obviously less children. So we might get another level to that whereby maybe AI is able to create all kinds of crazy personalized entertainment whereby people can actually be hooked to their phones for hours on end, watching all kinds of stuff. I mean, I've been seeing today, I saw something, there's a YouTube channel called, what is it called? Something Bible. But basically, what they are doing is that they're using AI to generate video of parts of the Bible. So I saw an 8-minute video where they did a whole AI generated version of the book of Revelations. And I was like, wow, okay. And you can see that obviously there's a lot of controversy around it. I would say, some pastors are complaining, religious leaders are complaining that look, these things were text based. They are supposed to be read and they're supposed to allow people to develop an imagination in terms of what they are reading and all that. So now all of a sudden, if you are eliminating the need for people to read, then and you're giving everything to them in the oral and visual form, then you have to basically understand that you are doing something to people's brains, right? And, I think we talked briefly some weeks ago about Joseph Heinrich's book, Weird, word. And, one of the parts early on in the book, one of the things he stresses and talks about is that actually reading fundamentally alters the brain, right? When people get it, when there's a culture of reading, it changes the way people's brains function, and it was something in Western society. So if we're already a society that is barely literate or is struggling with literacy and reading, and then all of a sudden you now have AI that can give people everything in the oral and visual form, then it's going to be really interesting.
There's been a bunch of that lately,
Mm,
honestly. So I don't spend more time on YouTube, but I do spend an unhealthy amount of time on Instagram. And I see
mm,
all kinds of videos, either from biblical stories. So
mhm.
I
Yeah,
mean, in July when it was raining a lot in Lagos, there was a video of Noah and his ark
I
in the
saw
lake.
that. Yeah.
You know, that was that was really funny. And on Instagram, there are now AI influencers, right? Accounts, yes, accounts, usually female, that are not real, but there are videos
Yep.
of them going on exotic vacations in actual places, also
Yep.
AI generated. So, like you
And,
said,
I think
yeah,
this thing gets so much better, and you can just imagine a world where it's just pretty much limitless, right? So
yep.
you can have non-stop entertainment, and brains are just being fried slowly with all of that, and like we mentioned earlier, we are not a society that has any kind of guardrails,
Mm,
right? So
mm,
if something happens, we don't have any cultural defense, we don't have anything, so something can come from anywhere and it will just diffuse into the population. I mean, you see stuff, I tell people all the time, like, Nigerian TikTok is a completely different world from whatever you think Nigeria on Instagram or Twitter is a completely different world. There people are just doing all kinds of stuff. There's no, I mean,
yeah.
there are no guardrails basically. So I
But
can
but
really explode a lot of this stuff. Yeah.
but for you, perhaps maybe we may want to close on this note, even though I don't want us to close on a pessimistic note because you just said Nigeria is not gonna build anything. I get random comments, thankfully not in our comment section, but random comments that I'm too pessimistic on 1914. So maybe I'm trying to change that. So, but in terms of governance, what would your own framework be like? Because, like, yeah, it's fun to talk about influencers and all that, but we know how elections can be. That's just
Hmm.
one case, and
Hmm.
how fake news has
Hmm.
become a thing. Now you can easily fake people's voices, their faces, and invent even events that never happened. With AI, we have an election in 2 years. I imagine the technology would have even gotten
Hmm.
significantly better in terms of the video models. And so what would your approach to governance be? I'm usually very careful about this issue because I know that the instant reaction for us is censorship,
Yeah.
right? And of course, we have to be smarter than that. You can't shut yourself off from the world. We can't do the old Twitter ban thing was just outrightly stupid. But how would you advise that regulators approach governance?
And this is a tough one, right? Do we even have the capacity to do it? Even if we wanted to do it, And I was reading something earlier today, where the Chinese government has rolled out a new law. It was just actually last week or so, where they says basically all any AI generated content on social media must be labeled, must come with a label now. All the main Tencent, WeChat, ByteDance, doing and all of those things now, the law has taken, the government has says basically that explicit markings must be clearly visible to users. So or digital watermarks should be embedded in the metadata. So anything that's AI generated, again, that is a country that obviously has the capacity in place already, and they actually are able to punish people who don't comply in there. And you already have a public that can sort of engage with it. Now, unfortunately for Nigeria, we don't have any tools of mass education in place, right? Where you can basically say, okay, just bombard and let people know that, okay, this is how AI is. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. Maybe we can have a campaign of saying, maybe each one teach one. That's probably maybe the one I can think of. Say maybe you have a campaign where maybe teaching educated young people how to identify this stuff, and then making them tell them that giving them a responsibility and say, okay, older people, it is your job to check on your parents, see what they are consuming, and being and give them tools and say, okay, here is how to point out to people who are not really computer savvy that this is how to identify stuff. So essentially, you use young people as your point men, basically. So you can reach young people digitally. They already have some of and they can engage with material. So you say, okay, here are the identifiers of whatever. Elections are coming, people are going to try all sorts, but take the responsibility to look after your parents or older people and point out to them that these are the signs to look out for, or just double check for them. Now, that will require a disinterested party to do. But, like we said already, the people in government and the opposition, they are probably thinking about how they can use AI to give themselves an advantage and to damage their opponent. So it's going to be an arms race. I don't see any regulator that will be able to do that kind of thing. Like I said, we don't have the tools of mass education that can educate people across the board and say, here is how to spot that kind of thing. If you say they must label all AI content, that's a waste of time. It's not going to happen. So
No.
the only thing is basically to, my approach would be a kind of like each one teach one. Get younger people
Mm,
who are more digitally native and more digitally savvy, give them some kind of basic training that is easy, and then encourage them to be like, for example, now, especially during COVID, my mom is older. She's a much older person, and she has a
yeah.
smartphone. Like, and during COVID, it was a nightmare to an extent because people were forwarding all kinds of stuff. So I just took it
Yeah.
upon myself and said, you know what, if you get anything, just before you do anything, before you do it, just forward it to me. That's all. Just forward it to me, or you call me and just let me know. And I was just debunking so much. So, and by the time I did it a few times, she herself, she got the hang of it. I said, okay, you know what? And even now, I still do it now, like, because, again, because she lives here, she's a pensioner, there's a whole scam world targeting older people with all kinds of
Yep.
text messages
Yep.
and all that kind of thing. So, I've had to do a lot of work with her, and, she's there now. Like, do not click any link in a text. If you are not sure, forward it to me. Sometimes you just send me a message that, look, I got a text message from so person. I didn't click on any type thing. That's all. So it's my job to protect her in this kind of world. That kind of, so I guess maybe it's one way to do it. If we have a disinterested party who is genuinely interested in being a regulator or being a referee and protecting people, then you can use young people as your anchor, as your hook
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
society and
Yeah.
say, that sort of thing. So, I mean, to me, that
Yeah.
that, that would be the way I would approach it.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you sort of got where I was going. So I don't have precise solutions to, but I think
Mhm.
this is where a place where we need responsible and keyword competent intermediaries to like take a lead on this, because we know that the approach to regulation is just, I mean, the way we do regulation, even ordinary media, is so it's kind of like the way we do policing and all the other things. It's just there to protect the state. So I mean, the only time our regulators are ever so active or whatever is when you say something against the government that is not even bad, but that somebody in government does not even like.
Yeah.
That is when they are out with their claws. So, but if we have an ecosystem of responsible, competent, knowledgeable intermediaries who are able to take the lead on this, work with the legislature to uh write the laws, and also work with the regulator on the enforcement, right? So
Yeah.
I think, because I think social media is still at the center of this. You can create a fake video in your house or on your laptop or wherever. If the reach is not there, it's relatively harmless, But the moment you put it somewhere where it can potentially reach millions of people, it completely changes the game. So, and we've not had any success in terms of regulating social
Yeah.
media. That is not just mindless censorship. So, I think this is an area that also needs creative entrepreneurship. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think we'll leave it there. Hopefully, we've covered enough of those points. Unfortunately, we don't have much solutions, and it was quite a pessimistic tone, but it's just the reality of what, where Nigeria is today and what the future looks like. But hopefully, we've been able to, for our listeners, hopefully, we're able to bring some global context, which is something that we try to always encourage here at 1914 Reader, where we try to bring, Nigeria does not exist in isolation. And
Yep.
whether you like it or not, currents and things that are happening across the world will have an impact on the country. You cannot block off this thing. So yeah, so that's it for today. Our next episode, hopefully we're going to have we'll be back with our guests in there. So we've got some new guests lined up. So hopefully the next episode in 2 weeks time will be the regular format. But hope you had hope this was useful. We'll see you again soon. Tobi, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ray. Always nice doing this with you.